Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into your sources to pull out the absolute best, most insightful nuggets. Think of us as your expert guides, navigating the information landscape you've brought us, helping you cut through the noise and get straight to what's most important and surprising.
Our mission is to explore the material deeply, uncover those resonant facts, and connect the dots you might not have seen on the surface. We're here to give you that shortcut to being well-informed.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into excerpts from the truly powerful book Becoming by Michelle Obama, a source you've shared with us. We've spent time with these pages, identified what stands out, and, well, we're ready to unpack the journey it presents.
We'll be exploring the key themes, foundational experiences, and personal perspectives captured in this material, giving you a curated understanding of her early life, career, and path to the White House without getting lost in unnecessary detail.
Ready to explore this incredible story layer by layer? Let's dive in. So right from the start, the source material establishes the bedrock of her life, childhood and family roots on the south side of Chicago. It really gives you this vivid sense of the environment and the people who shaped her.
It really does. And the core insight, I think, from this section is how those early relationships and that specific environment, even with its limitations, instilled a deep sense of self-worth and belonging. The book highlights the influence of her parents, Fraser and Marion Robinson. Fraser taught hard work, the importance of laughing often, and, keeping one's word.
Right. While her mother, Marion, showed her how to think for herself and use her voice. What the sources really emphasize is how they helped her see the value in her own story, her family's story, a story deeply tied to this country's history, even acknowledging its imperfections. There's that powerful line, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own.
That idea of owning your story right from the start, it's crucial. And it's set against the backdrop of their cramped apartment. The sources paint this picture of distinct zones. The upstairs, which was full of noise, playing, sliding in socks, boxing matches, games, and music like the Jackson 5.
Yeah, total kid chaos. And then contrasting with the downstairs, where her great-aunt Robbie, the piano teacher, lived.
Robbie, right.
Robbie would flick the light switch in the shared stairwell, just that small, sharp detail that signals rigid authority and a demand for order.
And Robbie demanded excellence, didn't she? Someone to win over, focused intensely on mistakes while tapping the beat.
Exactly. It's a picture of childhood where joy and strict discipline coexisted, sometimes literally in the same stairwell.
And beyond the immediate family, her grandfather, Southside, is presented as another powerful influence. The source describes his infectious love for music, pulling random albums, letting the kids touch the records freely, even designating a shelf for her records, like Stevie Wonder's Talking Book.
Oh, I love that detail. And, crucially, making food like milkshakes or fried chicken while listening to Aretha, Miles, and Billie Holiday, that sensory memory is so strong.
It really comes through.
To me, Southside was as big as heaven, and heaven, as I envisioned it, had to be a place full of jazz. It's just this window into a world where music wasn't just entertainment, but a way of life, a source of soul.
Yeah, and such a stark contrast to Robbie's rigid piano lessons.
Right. Another vivid detail from this time is her father's car, the Deuce and a Quarter, that bronze Buick Electra 225.
Oh, yeah?
The sources spend time on its smooth lines, narrow taillights, and her father's almost like religious devotion to keeping it buffed, waxed, and maintained at Sears.
You really get the sense of his pride in it.
Totally. And her childhood experience in the backseat, flopping around, draping bodies over the front, pulling up to talk to her dad, seeing the world from that specific vantage point. It's such an intimate detail about their connection through this prized object.
Moving beyond the home, early school experiences also shaped her. Kindergarten at Bryn Mawr Elementary, where she already knew basic words and had the advantage of her well-liked older brother Craig.
Right, the built-in advantage. She liked school, her teacher Mrs. Burroughs, the sunny classroom.
She felt confident, especially those Dick and Jane books. But then comes the color cards game, a seemingly simple activity that was actually a subtle sorting mechanism.
Yeah, bringing humiliation for those who failed.
And the source grounds this in the context of 1969 Southside Chicago, noting the absence of concepts like, self-esteem or growth mindsets being discussed. A head start from home was rewarded, leading to labels like bright or gifted. The insight here is how early children are sorted and how quickly some are given advantages while others face challenges, often based on circumstances outside their control.
That sorting continued outside the classroom too, didn't it? Venturing out into the neighborhood at age 10, driven by boredom after rec camp, was a step into a different kind of test. Tailing Craig, meeting other kids.
Euclid Parkway, that mini housing community with a green space at its heart, is described as a paradise free from cars, full of kids playing softball or double dutch.
Sounds idyllic. But joining this world meant facing a test to fit in, involving a girl named Dee Dee. Another challenge, right?
Always casting, yeah.
Yeah.
Another powerful section details her parents' approach to difficult topics, including finances. Her father's caution about buying a house, his awareness of trade-offs, prioritizing savings, warning, you never want to end up house poor.
Such practical advice. And what's fascinating here is how they didn't talk down to their children.
No, not at all.
Her parents talked to them like adults, indulged every question, never rushing discussions. Craig and she would grill them on everything from bathroom renovations to their jobs.
And that anecdote about her Socratic victory regarding eating eggs,
Oh, that's classic.
leading to 9 years of peanut butter and jelly for breakfast, it perfectly illustrates this dynamic and her early knack for debate.
Totally. It shows they fostered critical thinking even in everyday moments. Other family anecdotes add texture, like the trip to a cabin, swimming, her parents playing cards.
And her father, despite his MS, joining them in the pool, laughing and tossing them. It really highlights his spirit and determination despite his health challenges.
Yeah, really powerful. The move of the Stewart family, friends who were light-skinned black people, to Park Forest, the fabled suburbs, also left a mark.
Right. Visiting them there, driving the Buick south, seeing the sterile shopping plaza, the quiet, nearly identical blocks of tract homes. It was a tangible glimpse into a different reality away from the South Side.
And local tragedy also impacted her childhood. The McCullums' burnout townhouse skeleton, the lingering smell of smoke. This fueled Craig's anxieties, making him the family fire marshal, enforcing stop, drop, and roll drills.
Yeah, and the insight here is the parents' response.
Sure.
Preparation mattered. Arriving early everywhere, making her father less vulnerable, controlling what you can in the face of uncertainty. It's a theme of proactive resilience learned young.
Her grandfather, Dandy, reappears in the narrative with her direct interactions. The quit shouting, don't be mean to grandma, what's got you so mad moments. His anger is kind of a backdrop to their relationship.
And the source explains his background. South Carolina Low Country, grandson of slaves, son of a mill worker, part of the Great Migration, fleeing racial oppression and seeking industrial jobs in Chicago. Nicknamed the Professor, he wanted to go to college, became of age during the Depression, and worked at a lumber mill. His simmering resentment over professional opportunities lost due to his skin color, mentioned later, adds crucial context to his demeanor and the realities faced by his generation.
Yeah, that context is key. Her mother's role is explored again through her adult understanding. As a child, she told her mother everything about school, but never asked what her mom did all day or how she felt about being a homemaker.
Right, the things you only realize later. Yet her mother was always there, food on the table, volunteering to chaperone excursions. The source emphasizes that her mother was raising them to be adults, that their decisions were ultimately on them. This quiet strength and preparation for independence is a key takeaway from her mother's influence.
By 14, she describes feeling half a grown-up, maybe two-thirds, getting her period, announcing it, graduating to a more womanly bra, eating lunch at school instead of home. Skipping Southside's house for the Gore sisters' house felt like a big step.
It definitely marked a clear transition, the beginning of engaging with the adult world in a new way. Boys buzzing around, sitting on the stoop, flirting a sense of expectancy, unsure what it meant, observing peers whose bodies were changing, girlfriends looking 18, carrying themselves with a cool confidence, waiting for that call up to the adult world. It's a universal teenage feeling, but, rooted in her specific Southside context.
This transition is a perfect bridge to the next phase, navigating different worlds, high school, college, and early career. Whitney Young High School introduced her to a new concept, the apparatus of privilege and connection.
Right, what the source calls a network of half-hidden ladders and guide ropes. It was a different kind of social structure than she'd known. The clever commute strategy she used with friends to avoid the rush, riding the bus to a quieter stop, jumping off, hailing the regular bus, is a small but revealing example of how they learned to navigate systems to their advantage.
Pleased by our own cleverness, we'd smugly claim a seat. Love that. Her evening routine underscores this drive-quick dinner, talking to parents, disappearing into homework downstairs for privacy. Education was clearly the focus.
And the influence of the Jackson family through her friendship with Santita offers a real contrast to her home life. Meeting Reverend Jackson, seeing the different energy in their house routines often cast aside for leak conversations, advisors coming and going, constant planning.
Yeah, while her home was orderly and predictable, focused on family, the Jacksons were outwardly engaged, connected to a bigger community and, well, an important mission.
Santita and her siblings were raised to be politically active, boycotting, marching, work trips, standing on stages. The source mentions the bodyguards and threats against Reverend Jackson's life, highlighting the sheer intensity of that world.
And she felt discomfort with the fanfare and noisiness of politics, noting there seemed to be nothing especially neat about a life in politics. She participated because she loved Santita and was a polite kid, hinting at a practical approach even then.
Which brings us to the college application process and that pivotal moment. The college counselor, after reviewing her transcript, suggested she lower her sights, basically planting a suggestion of failure before she even tried.
Awful.
Yeah, this is a critical insight. The source quotes, "Had I decided to believe her, her pronouncement would have toppled my confidence all over again, reviving the old thrum of not enough, not enough." It reveals that deep connection between external validation and existing self-doubt.
But the power of her response, forged over 3 years at Whitney Young, was realizing she was more than that one assessment. She decided not to let one person's opinion dislodge her self-knowledge. She switched methods, applied to Princeton anyway, and importantly, sought out an advocate, Mr. Smith, the assistant principal and neighbor who knew her strengths and trusted her.
It's such a powerful lesson in seeking out support when facing discouraging voices, isn't it? Heading to Princeton was another significant step into a new world, the road trip with her father and boyfriend David.
And that special 3-week summer orientation program, a preparation gap program Craig had also attended, offering lessons on syllabi and navigating campus life.
Packing up, saying goodbye to her mom, which wasn't teary or sentimental, her boyfriend David is described with specific details. Easygoing, more adult, watched ball games with her father, joked with Craig, polite with her mom.
Real dates, fooling around, smoking pot in his car, his bookbindery job.
Right? Not invested in the job, just saving money. Leaving David at Princeton, she felt a lurch of affection kissing him. But she had this clear sense of a lit path leading out, and it was better to make a clean break.
Tough moment.
Yeah. The source mentions mumbling about being busy when he called the next day, and that their goodbye was for real and forever. It shows a difficult but decisive moment driven by her focus on her future.
Princeton itself is described in stark terms. Extremely white and very male, with black students making up less than 9%.
Yeah, and the insight here is the feeling of otherness. She felt like a glaring anomaly, poppy seeds in a bowl of rice. It was her first time in predominantly white community where she stood out just because of her skin color, finding it jarring and uncomfortable, at least at first, like being dropped into a strange new terrarium, a habitat that hadn't been built for me.
So different from the diversity of Whitney Young. This conspicuous presence led to another key insight. She took it as a mandate to overperform, to plow past the more privileged people.
Right? Quote, "My intensity was spawned, at least in part, by a feeling of, I'll show you."
That's a powerful motivator.
And she felt a responsibility, like she was representing her race. Anytime I found my voice in class or nailed an exam, I quietly hoped it helped make a larger point. It's a lot of weight for a young person to carry.
Absolutely. Meeting Sherney, a smart, beautiful black woman, barely 30, a lively New Yorker, is presented as finding an ally and mentor in this new space.
Charney is described so vividly: flared jeans, wedge sandals, 4 or 5 ideas at once, an uber mentor for students of color, an outspoken defender, juggling, lobbying, advocating, spinning new ideas, always running late, sprinting out the door, clutching papers, cigarette in mouth.
Sounds like a force of nature.
Totally. It was a heady experience, a close-up look at an independent woman with a thrilling job, also a single mother raising her son Jonathan, who Michelle babysat.
And the trip to New York with Sherney sounds like a crucial escape, a breath of familiar air, piling into the car, full speed toward Manhattan, talking and smoking.
Feeling tension lifting as the landscape changed from white fenced horse farms to choked highways and city spires. New York was home for Charney, like Chicago was for her. The source reflects, you don't really know how attached you are until you move away, until you've experienced what it means to be dislodged, a cork floating on the ocean of another place.
So true.
Yeah. She heard about other students' experiences with this otherness too, white students refusing to yield the sidewalk, a roommate uncomfortable with big black guys in the room. This reinforced the feeling of being in a habitat not built for her.
In contrast, her roommate Suzanne, nicknamed Scroozy, wasn't an overthinker. Decisions based on fun changed direction quickly. While Michelle stuck close to the Organization for Black Unity Third World Center, Suzanne ran track and managed the football team. Her friends were white and wealthy.
Suzanne gave up medicine because it messed with her joy, and academic probation didn't bother her.
This source describes them as Laverne to my Shirley, Ernie to my Bert, sharing a room that was an ideological battlefield. It highlights the different paths and priorities people have, even in the same environment.
Phone calls with her father while at Princeton were a consistent source of comfort. Oxygen, as she puts it. His voice, despite his pain, had no trace of self-pity, full of good humor and softness, a hint of jazz.
And he always asked if she needed money, and she never said yes, a small point of pride. Home felt distant, like a place in her imagination, but she stayed connected with high school friends like Santita at Howard University in D.C.
Visiting Santita at Howard brought laughter and deep conversations on an urban campus that felt familiar in some ways, even if it was D.C. The still in the hood joke about a rat. The student population was almost entirely black.
She envied Santita for not being isolated by race, not having the everyday drain of being in a deep minority.
Right. But she was also content returning to Princeton's lawns and archways, even if few people there could truly relate to her background. It shows the complexity of belonging and navigating multiple identities.
Visiting family in the South Carolina Low Country, staying with her great Uncle Thomas, Aunt Dot's cooking bacon, biscuits, yellow grits presented yet another different world. She loved and hated the South because it was so different.
Driving past the gateways to former slave plantations, and the source notes this was just a fact of life nobody remarked on. Eating venison in a falling down shack, a cousin showing Craig how to shoot a gun. The deep silence at night, punctuated by cicadas, made it hard to sleep. These visits connected her to her family's history and the enduring presence of the past.
Her reflections on caring about what others think really stand out from this period. Getting into Princeton, even off the wait list, made people look at her like she'd made her mark.
And here's a key insight she extracts from that. This may be the fundamental problem with caring a lot about what others think. It could put you on the established path, the my isn't that impressive path, and keep you there for a long time.
That's really powerful, isn't it? The risk of losing other people's high regard felt too costly to swerve. This pressure led her to spend 3 years at Harvard Law studying constitutional law and exclusionary vertical agreements, subjects she wasn't truly interested in.
She made friends who were genuinely called to the law, but her own passion stayed low. Yet, living by the code of effort result, she wouldn't underperform. She kept achieving, answering, "Am I good enough?" with a resounding, "Yes, in fact, I am." It speaks to her discipline and the internal standard she set, perhaps initially as a way to prove external doubts wrong.
This section ends with the profound loss of her college roommate, Suzanne, who died at 26. Holding her hand, watching her breathing, the nurses nod. Her mind went dark, no deep thoughts, just raw anger.
Yeah, the quote, "To say that it was unfair that Suzanne got sick and died at 26 seems too simple a thing, but it was fact, as cold and ugly as they come." The source captures the shock and disorientation of grief.
Feeling perverse that the world just carried on. Everyone's still there but Suzanne. Seeing people looking happy, working, oblivious. Quote, "How the world just carried on. How everyone was still here except for my Suzanne." It's such a universal feeling of disconnection and grief.
Absolutely. This takes us to a pivotal point. Meeting Barack and the evolution of her purpose. She was working at Sidley in Austin, on track for equity partner, when he arrived as a summer associate. His reputation as law review president preceded him. She was tasked with being his mentor.
Her initial impression is memorable. Weird name, quixotic smile, someone who brilliantly upended everything. Quite the introduction.
Right. Their relationship evolved from mentor-mentee to friends, then comrades in arms, eating lunch, billing the firm, learning about each other. Her life rooted in Chicago, his more global, consuming political philosophy, his father's death in Kenya and trip there, friends in Oahu.
She describes something changing between them, wondering about him, talking herself out of excitement or disappointment, having feelings, but, buried under her resolve to keep life and career tidy and forward, focused, free from any drama.
She felt he was like a wind that threatened to unsettle everything. And she guarded herself because her life construction felt delicate. The insight here. If one corner came untucked, I might discover that I was restless. If another popped loose, it might reveal I was uncertain about the professional path I'd so deliberately put myself on. It shows the underlying tension beneath her outwardly successful trajectory.
Him moving directly into her apartment on Euclid Ave for a summer break from Harvard Law was a big step. Learning to cohabit, getting to know her family intimately.
Yeah, he talked sports with her dad, helped her mother with groceries. Good feeling. And Craig assessing Barack's character via a high-octane basketball game with former college players at her request is a great anecdote.
Totally. Craig's opinion mattered. He knew how to read people in a game context.
And Barack passed the test. Craig's assessment, smooth on the floor, knew when to make the right pass, not afraid to shoot. Quote, he's no ball hog, but he's got guts. A practical, character-based evaluation.
Love it. Living without air conditioning, windows open, the noisy street life, she found it unsettling. But Barack didn't. She sensed he was more at home with the unruliness of the world than I was, more willing to let it all in.
Waking one night to find him staring at the ceiling, looking troubled, pondering something deeply personal. It hinted at a different, more internal world than she was used to.
Seeing Barack's political perspective in action offered a glimpse into a different kind of purpose. Hearing him speak in Roseland, a disenfranchised community.
What stood out was how he spoke, not talking down, not trying to act more black to win them over. Amidst the fear and helplessness, he was brashly pointing an arrow in the opposite direction, towards hope and action.
This contrasted with her own upbringing, which focused on overcoming personal obstacles, seeing past the demoralizing parts of being African American, looking ahead, succeeding. Standing at Operation PUSH rallies with Santita, hearing calls for Black pride, her purpose had been personal advancement.
The core insight from seeing Barack. She began to understand his hope reached beyond hers. Quote, it was one thing to get yourself out of a stuck place. It was another thing entirely to try and get the place itself unstuck. It's a huge distinction between individual achievement and collective progress.
Yeah, it really is. The source also highlights their communication styles. Barack could pour his heart out through a pen, raised on letters from his mother.
While she was an in-your-face sort of person brought up on Sunday dinners at Southsides, where you sometimes had to shout to be heard, her family gabbed, showing up at each other's homes spontaneously, filling rooms with stories and requests for advice. Even old boyfriends sought her father's counsel.
And her father called his grandmother in South Carolina almost daily. This paints such a clear picture of her family's open, communal, loud communication style versus Barack's more introspective, written one.
While at Sidley, she also advocated for diversity in the legal field, working on recruitment, pushing to consider students from state schools and historically black colleges like Howard, objecting to dismissal based on a B or a less prestigious undergrad.
The insight here is her assertion that they needed to look more holistically at candidates, considering how they used opportunities versus simply checking off boxes on an elitist academic ladder.
Right. Her goal wasn't to lower standards, but to recognize that rigid evaluation overlooked capable people who could contribute, emphasizing the need to interview more students from diverse backgrounds.
Visiting Barack in Hawaii offered another significant window into his world. Meeting his sister Oma, the immersive train ride through Kenya toward their ancestral home-packed cabin, live chickens, furniture, she realized how strange her life had become, how Barack had brilliantly upended everything.
Seeing the Kibera slum stream past poverty she'd never imagined was a stark reminder of the world's challenges. But seeing his character reflected in Hawaii's long-lasting friendships, devotion to his strong-willed mother provided reassurance.
Exactly, quote, without needing to discuss it outright, I knew he could handle a partner who had her own passions and voice.
These were qualities you couldn't teach in a relationship. Opening up his world showed her everything I'd ever need to know about the kind of life partner he'd be. It was about observing his character in his natural habitat.
This naturally leads us to their marriage, family life, and the beginnings of public life. They married on a sunny October Saturday in 1992 on the South Side at Trinity United Church of Christ.
It was necessarily a big wedding. Due to her deep roots, cousins of cousins, the guest list couldn't be trimmed. It speaks to the centrality of family and community in her life.
Barack's voter registration work for Project VUE is mentioned, where he ran the process in Illinois. The mission was to enroll black voters before the November elections.
The pay was abysmal, apparently, but the job appealed to his core beliefs, building on the legacy of drives like the one that helped Harold Washington. The stakes felt high in 1992, with Carol Moseley Braun and Bill Clinton on the ballot.
Shortly after their wedding, Barack needed to write his book draft quickly. His solution: isolate himself, renting a cabin far away. The source describes him dropping the final information 6 weeks after the wedding. His mother had found a perfect cabin in Smyrna, Bali, 9,000 miles away.
Oh, it's a glimpse into his focused, maybe sometimes distant work style early in their
For
marriage.
sure. For Michelle, starting at Public Allies as executive director for the new Chicago chapter was a significant pivot. It was a startup inside a startup, a field she had no professional experience in.
The organization, founded by recent college grads Vanessa Kirsch and Katrina Brown, aimed to help people find public service careers. Barack met the founders, joined the board, and suggested they contact her.
The core principle of Public Allies was finding and cultivating talent based on promise, not necessarily a college degree, giving young people aged 17-30 a chance if they showed leadership capability. The mandate was to seek out those whose best qualities might be overlooked.
This felt almost like destiny, didn't it? An invitation to apply what she knew after looking wistfully at the south side from her Sidley window. She felt a sense of latent promise, undiscovered in neighborhoods like hers, believing she'd know how to find it.
The insight here comes from her reflection on her own childhood. Contemplating the job, her mind went back to that second-grade class at Bryn Mawr, the pencil-flying pandemonium, and how she was plucked out.
She felt relieved by her good fortune then, but later, thinking about the 20 kids marooned with an uncaring teacher, losing a year of learning, she realized she wasn't just smarter, she had the advantage of an advocate.
So important. She saw how quickly small deficits can snowball. Public Allies sought kids like those.
And she found celebrating the success of the recruits, some becoming staff, leaders in government and nonprofits, to be one of the most gratifying feelings in her professional life. The organization is still strong decades later.
That's fantastic. The source then delves into the challenges they faced with fertility, trying to conceive, the adjustments, treating it like a mission, the joy of a positive test followed by the devastation of a miscarriage.
Yeah, really tough. Physically uncomfortable, her optimism cratered. Seeing women and children caused a pang of longing, followed by a bruising wallop of inadequacy.
Oof. Comfort was found in playing with Craig's kids, Leslie and Avery, who lived nearby, a small anchor in her grief.
Balancing family life with Barack's increasingly demanding schedule became a major point of friction, especially once they had children. Her frustrations felt petty before kids, but as a working full-time mother with a half-time spouse and pre-dawn wake-up, her patience wore thin.
Barack coming home to her, raging or unavailable, having gone to sleep sullenly. The source explicitly states, "We live by the paradigms we know," offering a key insight into their conflict.
Right. Barack's childhood paradigm was one of independence, a father who disappeared, a mother devoted but never tethered. Her paradigm was the tight weave of family, everyone always around, jammed at one table for Sunday dinners.
Completely different models.
Exactly. After 13 years together, they had to confront these deeply ingrained expectations of partnership and family life.
She felt vulnerable when he was away, prone to loneliness, because she was raised where everyone always showed up, let down when someone didn't.
And she felt fierce about advocating for the girls' needs. They wanted him close, missed him when he was gone. She worried he didn't understand how that felt for them, fearing his chosen path would steamroll our every need. This was a tension that arose after his state Senate run, a path they'd discussed when it was just the two of them.
Meanwhile, she continued her work at the University of Chicago Medical Center, promoted to vice president, leading the Southside Healthcare Collaborative. This initiative connected over 1,500 ER patients with regular care providers, regardless of ability to pay.
This work felt deeply personal. She saw Black folks streaming in with neglected issues, thinking of her own father's resistance to medical appointments, downplaying his MS symptoms to avoid making a fuss or feeling belittled by a wealthy white doctor.
So she actively worked to address this imbalance by hiring and training patient advocates from the community, helping patients set up appointments and understand affordable care. It was direct action addressing the consequences of systemic neglect.
A difficult personal reflection follows, tamping down her own ambition. Her work was rewarding, but she felt she owed it to her girls not to let it consume her.
The decision to support Barack's escalating career meant she had to tamp down my own efforts at work, stepping back when she'd normally step forward. She admits she numbed myself somewhat to my ambition.
She wasn't sure if others noticed, but she was acutely aware of what she wasn't doing. Small projects, mentoring. This highlights the trade-offs of being a working mother, especially in a partnership where one career trajectory becomes dominant. She became more cautious, protective of her time and energy for home life.
Barack's 2004 DNC speech is presented as a turning point that impacted their lives dramatically. Quote, 17 minutes of Barack's deft and easy way with words, 17 minutes of his deep, dazzling optimism on display.
The crowd roaring, the applause booming. Her walking out on stage, the hug, waving to the crowd. The energy was electric. But the insight here is more than just witnessing his success. It was recognizing that his potential was now public knowledge.
Yeah, the secret was out. Knowing he was a good person with a big mind and faith in democracy was no longer just for her and their circle. Quote, looking back, I think it was then that I quietly began to let go of the idea that there was any reversing his course, that he'd ever belong solely to me and the girls.
Hearing it in the pulse of the applause, more of this, more of this, more of this.
Yeah.
It was the sound of his path being set, and theirs changing irrevocably.
This change in trajectory brought new pressures and expectations, illustrated by an interaction with the senator's wife. Attending a luncheon for Senate spouses, the wife asked about her plans, assuming she'd moved to D.C.
Michelle explained her life in Chicago, her job, her mother's presence, the wife's gentle but cutting response. That can be very hard on a marriage, families fall apart.
Ouch. She felt the judgment, the implication that her choice was dangerous, that there was only one right way to be a senator's wife. Thanking her, hanging up, sighing. Quote, none of this had been my choice in the first place. None of this was my choice at all. She was Mrs. Obama, wife of a U.S. senator, but she didn't want to drop anything she was holding on to.
This feeling of lacking agency in the face of public life and expectation leads into the next section, the campaign and transition to the White House. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 is mentioned as a significant event for Barack.
Watching the coverage with a knot in her stomach, knowing Chicago family and neighbors could suffer similar fates. Barack's emotional reaction, flying to Houston, visiting evacuees.
This experience kindled something in him, that nagging sense he wasn't yet doing enough. It reinforced his get the place itself unstuck philosophy, connecting his personal drive to a larger sense of public service.
Discussion about a potential presidential run became unavoidable. He knew how she felt. Discussing it obliquely, the public's expectations woven into their private conversations. Barack's potential was always present at dinner, on the way to school, at work. A strange energy.
From her perspective, he was already doing plenty. She hoped he'd wait until the girls were older, maybe 2016. Even Craig, her protector, got swept up, calling to make a plug. Listen, Michelle, I know you're worried about this, but if Barack's got a shot, he's got to take it. You can see that, right?
Putting the pressure on her. She felt the weight of the decision was on her, questioning if she was afraid or just tired. But she had fallen in love with a man with a vision. Optimistic, undaunted by conflict, intrigued by the world's complications, strangely unintimidated by how much work there was to be done.
He dreaded leaving her and the girls, but reminded her their love was secure. Quote, we can handle this right. We're strong and we're smart, and so are our kids. We'll be just fine. We can afford this. It was a leap of faith they took together, despite her reservations.
The campaign kickoff is described as the no turning back moment, putting the family firmly in the public eye. A massive party planned for weeks.
Her fear. No one would show up. Being a doubter. Quote, what if we're not good enough? Maybe everything we've been told was an exaggeration. Handing the girls off to her mother and Mama Kay, she stepped onto the path.
Focusing on Iowa was crucial. They had to win or stand down. A curious state, rural, over 90% white as a bellwether for a black candidate from Chicago.
Winning Iowa was vital not just for momentum, but to send a message to black voters nationally that it was okay to start believing. The Illinois neighbor advantage was perceived as a factor by Plouffe.
Building her campaign team started surprisingly small. Allotted funds for just 2 people, planning to volunteer 2-3 days a week. She had no idea the level of support she would ultimately need.
Hiring Melissa Winter was the first step. Recommended by Barack's scheduler, Melissa had political experience and impressed Michelle immediately with her irreverent wit and obsessive devotion to detail. She felt like a peer and ally, someone she could trust with literally every part of my life. It underscores the personal relationships needed even in a massive political machine.
Campaigning meant repeatedly telling her story across Iowa. Her voice settled into itself as she found she liked telling it.
She felt comfortable sharing her story with people who reminded her of her own family. Despite racial differences, postal workers like Dandy, piano teachers like Robbie, stay-at-home moms like her mother, blue-collar workers like her dad. The power came from authenticity. She didn't need notes, just said what she sincerely felt.
The hiring of Sam Cass to cook twice a week is a small but telling detail about trying to maintain some semblance of normal life amidst the chaos.
Sam was an outlier, young, white, shaved head. But the girls took to him, and he taught them about cooking, seasons, and food. His educated perspective on food and health resonated with her hospital work and the compromises of feeding a family while working. It highlights her interest in practical, impactful issues even during the campaign.
The campaign pace was relentless. Each day, another race to be run. The constant struggle to cling to normalcy and stability for herself and the girls, carrying two Blackberries, one for work, one for the intertwined personal political life.
Daily calls with Barack were short and newsy. Quote, both of us accustomed now to not speaking of fatigue or our personal needs. There was no point because we couldn't attend to them anyway. Life was all about the ticking clock. The demands of the campaign compressed their personal space and time.
Yeah, and her comment about the polls, cracking up with Sam, the only problem is our guy is down by 30 points, he's never going to win, shows the mix of exhaustion and disbelief they sometimes felt, viewing the presidency almost as a distant, pleasant dream.
The Iowa caucus culmination was the breakthrough. Barack's speech that night, "America, our moment is now," gave the campaign the momentum it needed, catapulting him forward in the polls.
The South Side migration to Des Moines for the final push is described her mother, Mama Kay, Craig, family, friends, colleagues. She was touched by their support, knocking on doors in zero-degree weather. Hundreds came from around the country.
She was barely present in Des Moines herself, traveling constantly, making sure to be back at the hotel for the girls' 8 o'clock bedtime. Even then, surrounded by family and babysitters, the girls barely noticed her absence. Finding the room strewn with kitchen utensils is a funny human detail amidst the high stakes.
Then came the proud of my country comment and its swift, harsh aftermath. Speaking in Milwaukee and Madison, talking about feeling encouraged by the campaign, hope making a comeback.
Right, the quote. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. Not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change. I have been desperate to see our country moving in that direction and just not feeling so alone in my frustration and disappointment. I've seen people who are hungry to be unified around some basic common issues, and it's made me proud. I feel privileged to be a part of even witnessing this.
And what's critical here is how those words were immediately distorted. A film edited it down to a 10-second clip, stripping context, focusing on a few words. Quote, here was the first punch, and I'd seemingly brought it on myself.
She realized how weighted every phrase was that, unwittingly, I'd given the haters a 14-word feast. Just like in first grade, I hadn't seen it coming.
Flying home feeling guilty and dispirited, her team tracking negative stories. A pernicious seed had been planted, a perception of me as disgruntled and vaguely hostile, lacking some expected level of grace.
And the source is explicit about the racial undertones. Whether from opponents or elsewhere, the commentary almost always carried less than subtle messaging about race meant to stir up the deepest and ugliest kind of fear within the voting public. Quote, don't let the black folks take over. They're not like you. Their vision is not yours.
Just ugly stuff. This was compounded by ABC News splicing in Reverend Jeremiah Wright's sermons, showing callous and inappropriate fits of rage and resentment at white America. Barack and she were dismayed, seeing it as a reflection of the worst parts of a man who married and baptized them, but also recognizing echoes of the cranky mistrust about race she'd grown up with in her own family.
Feeling tired of being defenseless, being seen as different, she offered to stay home, be a regular wife who shows up only at the big events and smiles. Quote, maybe that'd be a lot easier on everybody.
You can feel the exhaustion.
Totally. Barack listened sympathetically, also tired, hating how family and political life blurred. Her very existence was folded into his campaign narrative.
They agreed she needed real help for the increasing scrutiny, needed to be supported like a candidate. This meant becoming better organized, insisting on resources, expanding her team with professionals like a scheduler, personal aide Kristen Jarvis, and communications specialist Stephanie Cutter.
They worked on sharpening her message and presentation, building towards the DNC speech that would help reintroduce her. Finally, she was granted a campaign plane, allowing for more efficient travel, interviews, and crucially, bringing the girls.
Election night in Chicago's Grant Park is the powerful culmination of this journey. Winning the election, walking out onto the stage as a family, her holding Malia, Barack holding Sasha.
The scene is described with contrasting images.
Yeah.
The wall of thick, bulletproof glass around the stage versus the vast ocean of people waving flags. Her brain struggled to process it. Too big, She has little memory of Barack's speech itself.
What stayed with her was the feeling in the air, a sense of comfort, the unusual calmness of that warm November night by the lake. Unlike the whipped-up energy of rallies, this was different.
Standing before a giant, jubilant mass of Americans who were also palpably reflective. Hearing relative silence despite the size of the crowd, being able to almost make out every face, seeing tears in many eyes.
Quote, I felt as if our family were almost falling into their arms now. We were making a pact, all of us. You've got us, we've got you. It's a sense of shared destiny and responsibility beginning in that moment.
And just like that, the transition to life in the White House began. Her initial impressions of the First Lady, FLOTUS role, were based on limited knowledge of previous occupants. Jackie decorating, Rosalind in cabinet meetings, Nancy's dress issues, Hillary's policy role.
She'd witnessed Laura Bush's composure. She knew the traditional roles involved teas, greetings, gowns, picking a cause. But the reality of the presidency scale hit immediately.
The spectacle of presidential travel, the fleet, the limos, the plane. Her joke, is there a clown car? Seriously, this is what he's going to travel with now. Answered by confirmation that this level of security and entourage was now every day.
Thousands of pounds of metal, commandos, bulletproof vehicles like the Beast limo, a 7-ton tank disguised as luxury, complete with tear gas cannons and sealed ventilation. The security felt overwhelming, and she realized the protection was only half visible.
Moving to Washington before the inauguration, so Sasha and Malia could start school with their classmates, involved temporary housing on the top floor of the Hay Adams Hotel. Overlooking Lafayette Square and the North Lawn, they saw the grandstand being built.
Seeing the massive banner on a building across the street, "Welcome Malia and Sasha," made her choke up. It was a very public welcome, but also highlighted the intense scrutiny her children would face.
The Secret Service presence meant confinement, being rushed through service entrances, rarely using front doors. Less visible was preferred. She hoped the girls' bubble would be different, safe but not contained, with room to make real friends, learn, have adventures, make mistakes.
Sidwell Friends School appealed because of its experience protecting privacy and its Quaker philosophy of community. Her mother's relocation from Chicago, though initially reluctant, was crucial for support. Her mother's quote, "I love those people, but I love my own house. The White House reminds me of a museum," and it's like, how do you sleep in a museum?
Yep.
Perfectly captures the feeling of moving into a place that was grand, but not, home.
Yeah, not your home. The connection with the Biden family happened naturally, an organic and harmonious merging. Barack and Joe had a natural rapport, an ease mixing seriousness and lightness.
She immediately liked Jill Biden, her gentle fortitude, work ethic. Jill's background as a stepmother and mother, earning her doctorate and teaching community college English throughout Joe's career, resonated. Jill's focus on military families was personal, tied to her son Beau serving in the Iraq National Guard.
Inauguration Day itself was a mix of weightiness and joy. Barack's speech, emphasizing hope over fear and unity over conflict, felt mirrored in the faces of the huge crowd filling the National Mall.
Quote, felt as if our family were almost falling into their arms now. We were making a pact, all of us. You've got us, we've got you. That sense of connection was a powerful start.
But the first night in the White House, residents brought a feeling of isolation, almost too cold to take it all in before the inaugural balls. Seeing few people upstairs beyond butlers felt lonely after being constantly surrounded by campaign staff. Suddenly she felt very much on my own.
Barack's early presidency actions were swift, signing the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, ending torture orders, starting the effort to close Guantanamo, overhauling ethics rules, pushing a major economic stimulus bill with 0 Republican votes. From her perspective, he seemed on a roll, delivering on promised change.
However, observing the political opposition from the State of the Union, SOTU balcony, revealed the depth of the challenge. Seeing Republicans staying seated, appearing obstinate and angry, arms folded like children.
The insight here is her realization that they would fight everything Barack did, regardless of whether it was good for the country. It felt like they just wanted him to fail. She confessed, wondering if any path forward was possible against such entrenched opposition.
Finding purpose as First Lady took time. A little over 2 months in, she felt overwhelmed, unworthy, anxious about the children, uncertain of her purpose. The public life felt designed to strip away part of your identity.
Speaking to girls at Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School in London changed things. It felt completely different and pure in alignment of my old self with this new role. Her message was simple. Are you good enough? Yes, you are, all of you. She hugged every girl she could reach. It was an instinctive, authentic response that reconnected her to her core self and purpose.
Yearning for regular life was a constant undercurrent. Barack often avoided talking about the grueling job and intractable challenges like the GM bankruptcy or North Korea tests. The ground around him never stopped shaking.
She craved glimpses of regular life, quizzing, visiting old friends about their jobs, kids, hobbies. Both of them needed to sponge up bits of gossip and everyday news from home, less interested in their own extraordinary existence than the mundane details of normalcy.
A date night in New York, eating and drinking in candlelight, felt like they had stolen away into a moment of normal connection, reveling in the feeling, however illusory. But the White House was a fortress disguised as a home.
Secret Service preferred they never leave, often requesting motorcades even for short walks. While she respected their watchfulness, it felt like confinement. Simple things like going out on the Truman balcony required shutting down streets, clearing tourists, making her often reconsider because of the hassle I would cause.
She found quiet contentment in small moments like enjoying a play by August Wilson, resonating with the Great Migration theme, getting lost in the performance. But flying back, she knew another date night like that would be rare. And predictably, Barack's opponents criticized the date as extravagant and costly before they even got home, making her feel guilty and selfish.
Public perception and the mom-in-chief phrase became another challenge. Professional working women worried she'd bury her experience to fit a prescribed First Lady pigeonhole.
She knew she was bound to disappoint someone. Every move read multiple ways. Labeled hard-driving and angry, then a disappointment to feminists for lacking stridency with the garden and healthy eating focus. Her casual comment to a magazine interviewer, primary focus would be mom-in-chief, was amplified.
Some embraced it, understanding the immense work of raising children, while others were appalled, seeing it as reducing her to only domesticity. It highlights the impossible tightrope of public image.
Fighting for the girls' spontaneity within the bubble became paramount. They had surrendered their own impulsiveness, but for Malia and Sasha, they'd fight to keep the possibility alive, wanting them to leave the White House safely, but not contained.
The story of seeing the rainbow lights on the White House for the marriage equality decision is a beautiful example. Barack couldn't go, Sasha was busy. Malia surprisingly agreed to be her wing woman for an adventure.
The small act of rebellion, deciding not to ask permission, just dusting past the agents by the elevator, using the cramped stairwell. Malia gave a devilish smirk, unused to her mother flouting the rules, agents clicking behind them. It's a powerful moment of reclaiming agency and prioritizing connection and a shared experience for her daughter.
This links to her reflections on protocol versus spontaneity. The formal brief for meeting the Queen and Prince Philip at Windsor Castle advance teams, precise instructions on who sits where in the car, contrast sharply with the spontaneous dash to see the rainbow lights.
She contrasted these highly choreographed moments with rehearsing her DNC speeches until she knew where every comma should go, speaking on live TV for the first time with high personal stakes and a demonized image. The goal was to humanize herself, explain her story, slay the caricatures and stereotypes. Her 2012 speech spoke earnestly about Barack, saying the presidency reveals who you are.
Reacting to the Access Hollywood tape with Trump's comments about women brought a wave of fury.
Quote, "Every woman I know recognized it. Every person who's ever been made to feel other recognized it. It was precisely what so many of us hoped our own children would never need to experience, and yet probably would. Dominance, even the threat of it, is a form of dehumanization. It's the ugliest kind of power."
Scheduled to speak at a Hillary rally, she felt compelled to address his words directly, to counter his voice with my own.
The White House Garden Initiative became a major focus and a powerful symbol. It taught lessons through the seasons, despite challenges like pests and rainstorms.
Working with head gardener Jim Adams and grounds superintendent Dale Haney, they made adjustments carried on. The garden produced abundance, used in White House dinners, and donated to Miriam's Kitchen for the homeless. Pickled vegetables and honey became gifts.
The garden became a source of pride, turning skeptics into fans. For her, it symbolized diligence, faith, health, and community. It made people happy. The communication strategy around it focused on health magazines, not political news, featuring moments like hula hooping or visiting Sesame Street.
Speaking from the garden, she connected it to issues of access to fresh produce in communities and rising healthcare costs. Building the Let's Move initiative involved quiet meetings, focus groups, PR, and culminated in concrete actions like a federal task force, corporations cutting salt, sugar, fat, better labeling, and PSAs. It shows how a seemingly simple project grew into a national effort.
Animal encounters at the White House added some unexpected moments, like the cheetah shooting out during a zoo visit on the South Lawn.
Oh my gosh, panic. grabbing Sasha, sprinting, trusting Barack and Malia were doing the same, animals leaping after them, the unfazed Secret Service agent Lloyd in the doorway, her yelling, "I thought you said they were sedated," and his calm reply, "Don't worry, ma'am, we've got a contingency plan."
Wow, just another day at the office, right?
Seriously. Connecting with military families was a deeply felt part of her role. Visiting Walter Reed, seeing the sign above a wounded service member's bed, quote, "Attention to all those who enter here. If you are coming into this room with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere." Seeing that spirit of resilience, self-sufficiency, and pride was incredibly moving.
Sitting with a quadriplegic man with his baby on his chest, meeting an amputee and answering his questions, these personal interactions were clearly impactful, offering connection beyond the formality of her role.
Barack's work habits in the White House are described with specificity nighttime, when his mind could travel without distraction, absorbing information, writing speeches, ESPN low on the TV. He stayed at his desk until 1 or 2 a.m., but always took a break to kiss her and the girls goodnight.
The impact of threats in the bubble was constant. Birther rumors, a man firing a rifle at the White House, hitting a window in the yellow Oval Room where Sasha and her mother were. They lived inside that bubble for over 2 years.
As a response, they looked for ways to widen the perimeter, opening the White House to people, especially children, ensuring the grandeur felt inclusive. Inviting school kids to state visit ceremonies, asking musicians to do youth workshops, it connected the arts, which were important in her own raising, to development.
Relishing the sight of high schoolers mingling with artists, swaying to the beat with Barack, her mother coming down for the music. These moments brought liveliness and connection back into the fortress. Meeting Nelson Mandela is described as the most surreal moment.
It has to be.
At the Nelson Mandela Foundation headquarters in Johannesburg, receiving unexpected word he would greet them at his nearby home, despite being 92 and having health issues. Barack had met him years earlier and kept a framed photo.
The kids understood it was a big deal. Her eternally unfazed mother looked stunned. It was a meeting of historical significance, a moment of awe even within the extraordinary life they were living.
Moving into the later years, the sources mention reasons for hope despite the challenges. The end of the Iraq War, drawdown in Afghanistan, major Affordable Care Act, ACA provisions taking effect, young people on parents' insurance, companies unable to cap lifetime coverage.
Seeing these as forward motion, despite an entire political party seemingly conspiring to see Barack fail, quote, "We had no choice but to stay positive and carry on." It's compared to the Sidwell mom asking Malia if she feared for her life at tennis practice. What can you do, really, but go out and hit another ball? A pragmatic response to overwhelming fear and opposition.
Election night 2012, polls closing, heading to the third floor where the team was preparing, Barack playing basketball. She wanted news directly, not from the jangling news coverage, just how to feel.
Responding to gun violence and loss became a recurring heartbreak. The Sandy Hook shooting in 2012, Barack's tearful press conference, offering resolve but finding no solace.
She wasn't ready to join him at the prayer vigil, too shaken. Quote, "I had been First Lady for almost 4 years, and there had been too much killing already, too many senseless preventable deaths, and too little action." She felt unsure what comfort she could offer.
The killing of Hadia Pendleton in Chicago in 2013 resonated deeply, feeling personal. Meeting her mother, Cleopatra Cowley Pendleton, at the funeral, hearing her say, "I did everything I was supposed to."
Like Michelle's own parents, Dia's parents made sacrifices for her education and kept her involved in activities. Building a relationship with the Dia's family, inviting them to the SOTU, State of the Union, and Easter egg roll, Cleopatra becoming an advocate, it was a way to channel grief into action. Her chief of staff, Tina, helped rally Chicago leaders to invest in community programs for at-risk youth, yielding significant pledges.
Visiting Harper High School in Englewood, Chicago was a powerful moment of direct engagement with the issue of gun violence. Recalling Englewood from her youth, rough but not as deadly. Seeing it now neglected, struggling.
Thinking back to the word ghetto, used as a threat, understanding how it signaled a place was both black and hopeless, foretold failure, hastened arrival, caused disinvestment, undermined schools.
Speaking to Harper students after hearing their tragic stories, she made a pitch from her South Side self. Use school. She was there to push back against the old and damning narrative about being a black urban kid in America.
Reminding them their story showed persistence, self-reliance, and ability to overcome. Assuring them they had what it takes, pointing out the free education and caring adults in the school. Bringing students to the White House and Howard University showed them a glimpse of what was possible.
She acknowledged words and hugs aren't simple fixes, but could offer strength and a vision forward. Her frustration with politics was clear. Congress passing no gun control after Newtown, politicians prioritizing NRA donations felt like a mess with nothing uplifting to say.
Everyday life versus the bubble is humorously illustrated by Malia's prom. Her asking parents to just be cool, please. Her embarrassment.
Classic teenager. Michelle was barefoot, Barack in flip-flops. Malia looked about 23 years old. They played it cool, shaking the boy's hand, taking pictures, hugging.
The contrast between the ordinary teenage moment and the knowledge that Malia's security detail would be riding the boy's bumper is striking.
She juxtaposes the world as it is gun violence, ISIS, Chicago homicides, police shootings of black men with the capacity for building a better reality, like marriage equality, seeing crowds outside the White House celebrating the rainbow lights, but from inside, hearing nothing.
Quote, "The White House was a silent, sealed fortress, almost all sound blocked by the thickness of its windows and walls. The Marine One helicopter landing gale force winds outside, but inside, silence, knowing it arrived by the smell of fuel. It's a vivid metaphor for the disconnection of the bubble."
Going out to see the rainbow lights with Malia, the small adventure, outside where people were gathered, not asking permission, busting past the agents, using the stairwell. Malia's devilish smirk at her mother, flouting the rules. The agents clicking behind them. It's a powerful final image of choosing connection and spontaneity over the constraints of protocol.
Looking back, looking forward, she asks, what lasts? Being the 44th first family, the first black one?
She hoped future visitors to the White House would see reminders of their time, recognizing their presence in history. The White House Garden farewell event is a final emotional scene, bringing together supporters, advocates, and students from the original Bancroft class, now adults. Sam Cass returned.
Gratitude for her team sorting letters, fact-checking flights, seeing her staff blossom. The burdens of being the first were shared. She credits optimistic young people and seasoned pros for having their backs.
She gives specific credit to Melissa Winter, her first campaign hire, chief of staff, close friend, calling her other half of my brain, loving her and the girls fiercely, stating, "No me without you." Mentioning Tina, her chief of staff, and Kristen Jarvis, replaced by Chinna Clayton, who became a big sister to the girls. It highlights the deep personal bonds formed amidst the public life.
Wow, that was a powerful journey through the material you shared. We've really seen how her family roots grounded her, how she navigated different worlds and expectations, and the constant tension between public duty and private life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the excerpts are full of these vivid, memorable moments, from the smells of Southside's kitchen and the sound of Robbie's piano to the shock of cheetahs on the lawn and the quiet rebellion of sneaking out to see rainbow lights.
The core insights woven throughout this material speak to resilience, the importance of self-knowledge and advocating for others, and the quiet strength in defining your own path, even when others try to confine you to a box. It shows how those personal foundations and small acts of authenticity carry through every phase of life.
Definitely. So, as you think about your own life, how do these experiences resonate? Where have you had to navigate vastly different spaces, face down external doubts, or fight to maintain your sense of self and spontaneity against expectation?
There's certainly a lot to consider in her journey. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And as a final thought for you, consider the concept of small deficits snowballing as described in the context of that second grade classroom. How do you identify and address those seemingly small gaps or disadvantages, not just in your own life or those around you, but also in the systems and communities you encounter?